All right, welcome everybody to Parshas Vayigash. As I said, we're going to flip it around. We're going to do the Chief Rabbi's book first. I just want to introduce it. As we've discussed, I'm here this week. God willing, I'll be away for the next 4 weeks. And please God, maybe even next week, we can all be in Israel learning together because that's where we should be. But the plan at this stage is to be back late January. 22nd or 3rd or something. So if things work out in terms of the way the world normally works, then the next year will probably be on the 27th or so, whatever, of January. 28th, I think it is, 27th. But we will let you know, yes. I want to do the Chief Rabbi's discussion first for a couple of reasons. One is it's an introduction to a new section, and I don't want to leave it behind, and so I want to just discuss that and just rush through a number of it. We'll go through the first chapter, but just rush through some of the headings of the next one because that ties into the Parshah in a way in terms of what hopefully we'll talk about. Okay, so we've finished the section on character. So we've built our characters basically. Character building in connection to Shabbos. And the next section, you'll see if you go page before page 79, there's a big heading there that says perspectives. And that's what this section's about. So chapter 16, perspective. It says, like character, our perspectives shape who we are. We've just explored how Shabbos nurtures within us virtuous character traits. In this part of the book, we explore some of the perspectives on our lives and our world that Shabbos teaches us. How we view our purpose and role in life affects everything we do, feel, and think. How we view our identity as Jews directly impacts how we express it. There are fundamental truths that frame our philosophy on life and its meaning. Shabbos teaches us many of these ideas and principles that shape how we see the world. The reason I want to do it is because of that. How do we see the world? How do we see what's happening in the world? Our eyes and our brains are Western. We all grew up, even if we went to a ultra-Orthodox, let's use that term, school, and we grew up in the Western country. Let's leave Israel out of it for the moment. But Israel is a Western country for all intents and purposes in the Middle East. But even if we grew up there, our entire perspective is Westernized, with a little bit of Judaism thrown in. And that's what the Parshah, this week's Parshah, next week's Parshah, really is trying to bring home to us that we need to focus on looking at our Jewish side of things, as opposed to our secular side of things. We're all secular. It doesn't matter how religious we are, we all live in a secular world, and we can't live without that world. But our perspective and our thoughts and our brains can process things slightly differently. These perspectives are embedded deep in our very being. Before our soul is sent down from up on high and placed into a body with absolute clarity. We know what is true, what is right. We know our purpose. But then once we arrive here and enter our body, that clarity becomes clouded. We can so easily lose our clear sense of purpose and identity. We need to remember the truths we once knew. Memory, in its most profound sense, is about rediscovering our essence, remembering who we really are and why we were sent here. Before we're born, every one of us is basically given a contract to sign. In our human eyes and the way we physically think of things, Hashem presents us a contract and he says, this is going to be your life. This is where you're going to live. This is how you're going to live. This is how much money you're going to make. This is all the troubles you're going to have. There's everything about you. Are you prepared to go down to the world for the next 120 years? Or maybe even, chas v'shalom, but maybe even a baby who dies in childbirth. He has one moment of life. That neshama needed to come down to the world for that one moment. And that neshama in Shemayim, before it was born, signs a contract that the soul understands exactly where we're coming from and why we are sent here. The neshama doesn't want to come here. Our soul is holy. It wants to connect to Hashem. But in order to grow, we need to connect to Hashem in a physical way. That's what mitzvahs are about. Mitzvahs are about us connecting to Hashem. Taking our physical body, which the rabbis describe as the clothing of our neshama, and taking it and elevating it, so that those people who are extremely elevated You hear of great rabbis who have no physical possessions virtually. They pretty much live on a shoestring because they don't need it, because they've elevated their neshama so highly that they don't need to rely on physical things. Their soul is what drives them. It says that Adam and Chava, the first people in the world, they were 99% neshama, whatever the percentage is, and 1% guf, body. We're the opposite. And our role in this world is to try and make that 1% into 2, 3, 4, 20, 50, whatever it can be, to elevate ourselves, not to live day to day. I go to work so that I can eat, so that I can go to work so that I can eat, so that I can go to work so I can watch TV, so I can go to work so that I can eat, is the way Western man thinks. I need to make as much money as I can so that I can eat. Or I can go on holiday, or I can buy a fancy car, or I can buy a bigger house. It's all about day-to-day materialism, thinking, how am I going to retire? Am I going to have enough money in retirement? And we all think like that, and there's nothing wrong with that thinking if we throw in the Jewish perspective. And I'm using that word very loosely, whatever that means. Okay, so he says, our sages describe our earthly existence as the world of forgetting. We're surrounded by so many distractions that can lead us to forget the purpose of life. We live in a physical body and in a physical world that can easily distract us with glittering objects and enticing, though transient experiences, and with the demands it places on us simply to survive. How do we remember why we were sent here in the first place? How do we remember that we are essentially a soul clothed in a body? How do we realign our perspectives with our true purpose? Shabbos is a day of spiritual memory, of reorienting our perspective. Remember the day of Shabbos to keep it holy, the Torah says. What does remember mean in this context? Clearly, it is something more profound than merely the act of mental recall. Shabbos is a day where we remember who we are, where we come from, and what our true purpose is. It's a day set aside by God to illuminate our lives with divine perspective, to activate our national memory of our birth at Sinai, where God gave us a Torah on Shabbos itself. The soul has absolute clarity. The body introduces murkiness and confusion. It's only at the moment of death, when the separation of the soul from the body, with the separation of the soul from the body, that a person rediscovers complete clarity. And we hear that often. You hear people who have these near-death experiences. They saw white light. Some people, unfortunately, see black light, whatever the case might be. But there's this moment of clarity. We hear of stories where people come back in dreams, and the Gemara's rife, many stories in there. There's stories of people through the ages who've said, come back and tell me what it's like in the next world and answer all my questions. And they said, well, there's no questions because it's just clarity. We understand everything. So when we die, our soul leaves this physical world. We return to God and the world of the souls. And then we see again with complete clarity what the purpose of our lives was meant to be. The moment we leave our bodies behind, we remember all the truths we understood so clearly before we were born. But while we are here, it is so easy to forget. Most of us forget almost all of the time. But Shabbos gives us that opportunity just to, in one moment, in a way, when lighting candles and saying Kiddush, whatever it might be, just to connect and to realize where we've come from. That's why it is a great kindness that Hashem gave us Shabbos, a day for remembering and recalibrating, for reconnecting with the foundational truths of our existence. It gives us a glimpse of the spiritual clarity the soul gains after it leaves this world, which may explain why the sages of the Talmud describe the day as a taste of the world to come. So Shabbos is 1/60th of the next world, of Olam Haba, of the world to come, whatever that means. But it's just a glimpse that we can get into it. Anything we learn on Shabbos, whatever it might be, listen to Rosh and Shul, is at a level magnified to what we learn during the week exponentially, because it's that day of connection. Shabbos is our lifeline to truth, saving us from being lost in a world of distraction. It's a day we transcend the world of forgetting and gain the divine perspectives we need for life. In the 15 chapters that follow, we explore 15 perspectives that Shabbos gives us, drawing on the teachings and insights of our great sages from across the generations. These perspectives lay the philosophical foundations of who we are, why we exist, and what we are here to do. They're not merely abstract intellectual concepts, they're foundational truths They animate our existence, coloring every moment of life with meaning and purpose. As I was reading that, I was thinking that he encapsulates the deepest thoughts into Shabbos in just a few words, except for the fact that he's Americanized and spelled color without a U. But that's because the target market has to be Americans, because most English-speaking Yidden are in America. Okay.
Americans can't read English words.
Yeah. Okay, so what I want to do is very quickly, you don't need to turn the page, I'm just going to read the headings of the next few chapters because it ties very much back into the Parsha. We have a creator and he cares about us. And sorry, not only ties into the Parsha, it ties into, if we take a step back and think a bit deeper, it ties into everything. Everything that happens in the world. Why did October the 7th happen? Because we have a creator and he cares about us. We can't understand that. And it's gut-wrenching and it's really hard for us to understand what's going on. But in hindsight, those questions will all disappear. But right now, we just have to remember that God is holding it all together. Hashem is orchestrating everything, as Rabbi said in chapter 18. Hashem elevates and sustains existence. Every single thing we get comes from Hashem. Hashem is close in chapter 20. You don't have to turn the pages. I'm just looking at the headings. Hashem made us a nation. This week's Parsha is when that nation is forged. And we'll come back to that in a few moments. Our lives have purpose. We need to remember that when we're not here just to go through the motions, to go and work, to retire, to help maybe volunteer, and then to move on to the next world. We need to know that every single thing we do has a purpose. And wherever we are in life, we can elevate ourselves to that purpose. Because mitzvahs connect us to Hashem and to people. Because by doing a mitzvah, we're connecting to, firstly, what Hashem commanded us to do. And it's a bit of a three-way street, because we're doing mitzvahs with us and Hashem, with us and our fellow human beings, because we need to, chesed being the ultimate one. Anybody who says they can do chesed has got a lot to learn, because we don't know how to do chesed properly, but we try, and that's the most important thing. And we do mitzvahs between us and ourselves to elevate our own neshama. So we've got this three-way, I guess, partnership. Everything we do can be done in a mitzvah. If a person goes to work, they are going to work to do a mitzvah to earn money in order that they can sustain their family, that they can do other mitzvahs. A person goes and plays bowls, and you help another person walk down onto the green. You've just done a mitzvah. You know, they always talk about helping the little old lady cross the street because she couldn't walk. The moment we do that, we're helping somebody. The moment we take it and we say, I'm doing a mitzvah to help this person, it's elevated us. If we just think about, we all need tradespeople to come into our house, a cleaning person, whatever, electrician, whoever it might be. They come to you that day. The Chofetz Chaim brings this down very strongly. He says, if somebody does something for you, a job for you, and you pay them on time, you owe them the money. It's not that you don't owe them the money, but you pay them. They finish the work, and you pay them. Finish the work today, you pay them in the daytime, whenever it is. Today, tomorrow, whenever you're due to pay them that money, on that daytime, and you pay them and you think, I'm doing a mitzvah to pay somebody for a service, I've just connected to Hashem. Everything we do, every single thing we do, we just need to think. Unfortunately, most of us just go through the motions. And life just lives us as opposed to us living life. I don't know if I just made that up, it makes sense. But, it does? Good. Okay, so...
To eat, to live, or live to eat.
That's exactly right, yeah. Okay, our mission is broad, etc. So, and there is a world to come. I won't go through all of them. Maybe that is all of them. We live in the past, present, and future, and that's what we need to remember. Yes.
When you do a mitzvah, can you recognize it yourself? Can you say, "But I've done it," or should one just remain?
One needs to recognize it before you do it to yourself. So I'm about to do a mitzvah. Thank you, Hashem, for giving me the opportunity to do this mitzvah. And when you've done it, thank you, Hashem, for allowing me to connect to you. And that's really davening. At the end of the day, we live in this very structured world in Yiddishkeit. It's very much, I think, from what I've understood, in Europe, what happened over time was, to some degree, the Jewish people kind of split into two. I'm talking not in political sense and not in hashkafa, but we sort of had those people who were learning in the shtetl and were able to go to yeshiva, and you had the peasants. Essentially, obviously, the rich people, whatever, but your general Yiddish mamas in the shtetl knew how to live as a Jew, but it was all ritual. It didn't have the depth and the background. Those people who were fortunate to go to yeshiva and those families that were able to learn were able to have the depth and the background. And that's where it seems like the Hasidic movement came from. Its goal initially, it's changed, but its goal initially was to bring in and infuse those peasants who were just doing things ritualistically, going through the motions, but infuse them with song and alcohol. If you think about Hasidism, initially that's what it was about. It was bringing the people in through song and through giving them schnapps.
Well, that's Chabad's theory.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Chabad holds on to that very much so to some degree. Other Hasidim have become far less outreach based and far more inwards based. It's very hard to break into another Hasidic group. Chabad's thing is not talking against anybody, but they bring people in, and unless you become a full-on Chabadnik, they don't know what to do with you. They get to a point where they're stuck because you kind of become too frum for their outreach work, but you're not Chabad enough for them to Chabadanize you. I may have another word.
What a lovely word.
It is. They put new words in, yes. But so everybody's got their place. What Chabad has done for the world, for the Jewish world, is phenomenal. But they get to a point, and others can step in, hopefully. But it's not only them, it's everybody's got their place. What we missed out was that gap. You know, tefillah, the Shemona Esrei, if you think about it, saying the Shema, in kind of, we've lost that ability to understand, but at the end of the day, what is that? It's a form of meditation. Meditation, there's some different meditations. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, brought this out. He was one of the first rabbis who wrote in English very, very deep works. He translated, he died a very young man, he was in his 40s. But he brought out the most incredible things. And he wrote at least 2 books on Jewish meditation. And a lot of the focus is when I say the Shema, I am meditating. Because there are many forms of meditation where people just say something over and over and over again. We say the Shema twice a day. We say Shemona Esrei. Now, that is a very long meditation, but it's the same set of words that we say, same 19 blessings, 3 times a day, every single day. That is meditation. What it became was rote. It became ritual. It became listening to a choir or a chazan. And it lost that absolute depth across much of the Jewish world. Unfortunately, the Holocaust came and it ripped out everything and a whole generation of us. Organizations like Osamach, Eish HaTorah, Navei, which is connected to Osamach, have come along and have re-established that. I was talking to Rabbi Joseph this morning. We're discussing how Osamach is absolute. What they do there is absolute emes. My kids love that word, that phrase. It's absolute truth. Because all Osamach does, not all they do, they take kids in who've come from very little or no background in the main, and they teach them Gemara. Because that's truth. But they learn the depths of Gemara from nothing to 100. Very, very quickly they pick up on this. That's their focus because it's bringing back the essence of what our forefathers put in place. So it's probably a good segue to go into the Parshah. So we're on page 250 in the Chumash. And we left last week's Parshah, Parshas Miketz, on a cliffhanger. If you remember, at the end of last week's Parshah, Yosef had put his cup, had arranged to put his cup into Binyamin's sack, and the brothers all came back, and they are now about to have this standoff. They've got this viceroy of Egypt, and they've got the brothers. And this week's Parshah starts, page 250, Vayigash Elav Yehuda. Yehuda approached him, and he said, what Yehuda had done at this point in time, he's about to figure out, okay, we are about to wipe Egypt off the map. Egypt can no longer be a power. They can't terrorize anybody again. Sounds familiar?
Very.
Yehuda sent his brother Naphtali. Naphtali was known as the fastest runner imaginable. In next week's Parsha, we encounter Naphtali running to get, when Yaakov was about to be buried, right at the end of the Parsha, right near the end of Sefer Bereshis, Yaakov was about to be buried, and his brother Esav comes and disputes whether Yaakov should be buried in Hebron in Maras Machpelah or not. They send Naphtali, because he's as fast as a hind, to go and get the deed that Yaakov bought the birthright from Esav. Just to jump to that quickly, interestingly enough, who is buried in Maras Machpelah in Hebron in the cave? Adam and Chava, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, not Rochel. Rochel's buried on the way in. And Esav's head. His head.
His head?
Yes, because there was this massive fight going on, and Hushim ben Dan, the son of Dan, Yaakov's grandson, Hushim was deaf. And he could see what's going on with this argument between Esav and his father and his uncles. And he doesn't know what's going on here. And he takes a club and he whacks Esav's head off, basically. And so Esav's head is in there. So they do have some portion, because they did do a bit of teshuvah, they do have some ability to connect. But we're not there yet. Yaakov's still got a few years left in his life in this week's Parsha. So Yehuda sends Naphtali around Egypt to basically scout it out. As quick as you can, work out, can we take this place down? And Yehuda is Yehuda Areh, he's a lion. And he's about to scream, basically, and take Joseph's head off, as well as the rest of Egypt. And he says to the brothers, I'll take 3, they worked out Egypt's got 12 areas. He says, I'll take 3 of the areas and I'll wipe them out myself. The rest of you divide up the 9, and that we're ready to go into battle against Egypt right now. This is unacceptable. We do not have things planted in us. They gave us our money back. The cup was put in Binyamin's sack. Our money's back. This is not on. We're going to take them down. So the picture here is a battle between 2 giants. Yosef is the king, the viceroy. Yehuda is going to be the future king of the Jewish people, because King David and all his descendants are from Yehuda. And we're now about to have this massive war between the 2 empires. Comes the end of time, or then when Mashiach will come, we're going to have according to some opinions, Mashiach ben Yosef. Yosef's descendant's going to come first as an introduction. The first king of the Jewish people was Saul, who was from the tribe of Ephraim, which is Yosef. And then Mashiach ben David from Yehuda will come. So there's this ongoing interplay between Yehuda and Yosef throughout time, potentially. And he says, if it pleases my Lord, let me just speak up in your ears. Don't get angry. Because he's saying to him, if you get angry, we get angrier. Remember what Shimon and Levi did. He doesn't know that Joseph knew this, but to Shechem. We can take down, 2 of us took down a whole city, the 12 of us can take down, or 11 of us can take down an entire country. No problem whatsoever. Don't get angry. Don't let your anger flare up against your servant. We know you're like Paro. We're your servants. But you've been questioning us about our father and our brother. We did everything you want. We brought down our little brother to you. And now you do this nonsense? And he goes through the whole story he just recounts exactly what happened. And he tells him what Yaakov, their father, had told him to do. Go down to Egypt, take food with them, make sure you pay for it, sort this out. And he actually speaks to him in a very respectful manner. If you look down the bottom of page 250, 251, and now if I come to you, to your servant, my father, and the youth is not with us, since his soul is not bound up with his soul, what happened? The youth is missing. he's going to die. Because Yehuda had taken Achrais, he had taken responsibility to make sure that Binyamin would come back. He had told his father, last week's Parshah, I will make sure, this is on me forever. Don't make our father go down to the grave. He's basically appealing to Yosef's compassionate side. He says, I can't go up. How can I go to my father if the youth's not with me? You want to take him away from us? And then suddenly Yosef, it says, we get to chapter 45. V'lo yachal Yosef lihif'apek l'chol hanitzvah tzavim alav. Yosef couldn't hold himself back and kicked everyone out from before. He couldn't cry out. He said, get everyone out of here. It's enough. And nobody remained there with him when he made himself known to his brothers. He didn't want his brothers to feel embarrassed at this point in time that he's going to tell them, I'm Joseph that you sold to Egypt. So that's part of the thing. And he, at the same time, wanted to make sure that the prophecies that he had were put into place. So his whole thing was, he had his dream in Parshas Vayigash a few weeks ago, that the brothers would bow down to him. 11 would bow down to that. That prophecy has come true. Then he had another dream that the stars, the moon and the sun and the stars were bound down to him, his father, his mother, and the brothers. That prophecy hasn't come in. He's now in a turmoil. Does he reveal himself? Because if he does, his father won't bow down to him. That dream won't be fulfilled. So be it. But he suddenly breaks down and he can't continue. He's at that point where he needs to put in place what Hashem is wanting. He's now realized, this is what's going to happen. We know we've got to go down somewhere. Abraham was told, your children are going to go down for 400 years to a place, and then they're going to be freed and come up to Israel. He now realized, okay, I've been put into this position so that the Jewish people can come down, the Bnei Israel can come down to Egypt and fulfill that prophecy that we will go down somewhere and come up, and Hashem will redeem us, give us the Torah, and take us back and give us what was called Eretz Canaan, land of Israel. He's now putting in place, and he's now figured out this is exactly how it's going to happen. And so he breaks down and he says the most incredible words. Verse 3, Gimel. Vayomer Yosef. Yosef says, Elechav, to his brothers, Ani Yosef. I'm Joseph. Ha'oid Avichai. Is my father still alive? They've just told him. Yehuda has just had this discussion with him. We've got to go back to our father. I've promised our father. Listen to what he's saying. Is my father still alive? Just what you've put our father through by selling me. He's been in mourning for these last 22 years. I've been away. And now you need to consider, has he survived? Is he still Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov our father, or is he just some shell of a person? Is he still that vibrant leader of the Jewish people, or is he just somebody that's kind of living life day by day because he can't? Ha'oid Avichai, is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him because they were just shocked. You can imagine the shock. So Yosef again said, come close, come close. And he says to them, I'm Yosef, your brother. It's me who you sold to Egypt. That was the password, so to speak. Nobody knew this. Nobody. And then he tells them, don't be distressed. Don't reproach yourselves for having sold me. It was to be a provider that Hashem sent me ahead of you. He's now putting the whole thing in place. He's realized Hashem is in control. That's why I wanted to talk about those chapter headings, at least in the Chief Rabbi Shabbos book. Hashem is in control. There's been 2 years of hunger in the midst of the land. There's another 5 years to come. There's going to be no plowing, no harvest. Hashem sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival in the land and to sustain you for a momentous deliverance. They knew exactly what was coming. They knew about Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we're going to be led out of Egypt, taken out and get the Torah and become Hashem's people. This was setting it all up. It was not you that sent me, Hashem sent me. He made me a father to Paro. It's very interesting words, la'av leParo. In other words, Yosef, although his the viceroy, the second in charge, he's like telling Paro what to do. He's running the country. Paro is just a figurehead type of thing. Master of his household, ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Hurry, go to my father and say to him, so said Joseph, Hashem has made me master of Egypt. Come down, do not delay. Get down here now. We need to start this exile as soon as we can, because the sooner we start it, the sooner we get out. And then he says, I'm going to put you in the land of Goshen. So you'll be near me, you, your sons, your grandchildren, your flocks, your cattle. I'm going to provide for you, because there's 5 more years of famine. Remember the Paro's dreams? 7 and 7. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. There's been 2 years now, and we found out that last week there were 2 years. This is the end of 2 years. Don't become destitute, your household, and all that's yours. Tell my father about the glory of Egypt. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, and they wept. Benjamin wept on his neck. He then kissed all his brothers, and they suddenly, Shalom al Israel, as we say. There was peace amongst the children of Israel. There's obviously, he's thrown everybody out. We've got to assume that people were kind of listening in, because there was suddenly, it gone from this almost screaming match, ready to take down all of Egypt, to this crying and loving and whatever. Paro heard about that Joseph's brothers were there. News gets through the system very quickly to Paro. He's told that Joseph's brothers have come. Paro is happy. He says to Joseph, tell your brothers, load up the animals, go back directly to Canaan, bring your father down in the household, bring him down. So Paro gives gifts. Joseph then tells the brothers, go back to our father. He's not going to believe that I'm still alive. Take these wagons with you. He gives them wagons. A wagon is called an agala. In Israel we call it a little pram, an agala. Take these agalot with you to remind our father that the last thing we learned together was a halacha called egla arufa. Egla, agala, very similar words, that I'm still holding as a Jew, that I've been learning Torah, and I still remember the very last thing I learned with my father 2 decades ago. And egla arufa is just what it is briefly, if a person is found dead between 2 towns, and they don't know which town is closest, the Beit Din has to come along, and they have to measure from the town to his body, and the whole discussion in Gemara, how and where, and the most senior people in the Beit Din have to come along, and then they chopped off the back of the neck of a calf, basically. They chop a calf's head off as an atonement, because this person was killed on the road. Why were they killed on the road? Because the people of the town that he left didn't do achnasas achim with him. They weren't good enough to him. They didn't take him out. We've got a mitzvah when somebody comes to visit, we walk them outside, daladamas. We take them for damas outside to accompany a person. They didn't accompany him. They didn't give him food for the journey. They didn't give him mitzvah geld. Well, the mitzvah of giving somebody money when they travel is for exact that. If you're doing a mitzvah, you're given protection with that mitzvah. That's why we take money with us when we go overseas, so that we can give tzedakah on the other end. I'm what's called a shaliach mitzvah. I'm a messenger who's doing a mitzvah, therefore I'm protected. That town, the closest town, must be the one he left. He wasn't afforded the right protection, therefore we have to go through this elaborate process to teach the people how to be more kind to visitors. And so it's a whole and so Yosef sends his father this message with the brothers, go back, tell our father to come down, tell him, even though I'm the viceroy in Egypt, I'm still Yosef. I'm still holding in the Torah that I was learning with my father the day that he sent me to visit you in the fields, and that I was sent down to Egypt eventually. It's all in Hashem's hand. And he sent all these presents with them, and Yaakov now gets the news. They refuse to, he can't understand this. It just doesn't sink in. And eventually they get one of his granddaughters, Sarah, to sing to him. And she sings to him that Joseph's still alive. And that through the music that she's playing, it soothes him and he takes it on board. But he doesn't know He says, if you look on 256, 257, just before chapter 46, the last verse, Vayome Yisrael said, Yisrael being Yaakov, Roiv Oid Yosef Benichai. How great, it's amazing, my son Yosef's still alive. Chai Elcha Ve'erenu B'terem. Maybe I should go and see him before I die. But he doesn't know. He sets off and he goes as far as Beersheba. And he stops, and he doesn't know if he's got permission to leave Israel to go to Egypt, because he doesn't know that Hashem wants him to do that. He's been told to stay in Israel. And he goes down there and he slaughters sacrifices to Hashem in Beersheba, and Hashem spoke to him in a vision, it says, a night vision, in a dream of sorts, a prophecy. Hashem says, go down. I'm Hashem, your God of your fathers. Have no fear, go down to Egypt. I'm going to establish you as a great nation. I'm going to go down to Egypt with you, and I'll surely bring you up. Even through what we went through in Egypt, the prophecy was 400 years it would go down. In the end, it says, Redu, go down. The numerical value of the word Redu is 210. We were only there for 210 years. In that 210 years, we were slaves in Egypt for 86 years. And that 86 years was where it was really hard. But Hashem says, I will be with you there. Even when we were enslaved in Egypt, Hashem was still with us there. Wherever we go, and that's what the chief rabbi is saying, Hashem is, what did the kids say? Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere. Even when we can't feel or see Hashem, we need to know He's there and we can connect to Him at any time. So Yaakov arose, he went from Beersheba, and they transported him as well as all their children down to Beersheba. The Torah then lists all the people who went down to, the travel to Egypt, all the people who went down to Egypt. Reuben and his sons, Chanoch, Palu, Chetzron, Kalmi, Shimon, his sons, etc., etc. Then Levi's sons, Gershon, Kahas, Merari. And then it says, Yehuda's sons, Onan, Shelah, Peretz, and Zerach. But remember, and Onan had died in the land of Canaan, and Peretz's sons were Hezron and Hamul. So it brings all of them in. Even and Onan, to some degree, some of the rabbis learn out that through the process of what we call Gilgal, called reincarnation, their neshamas were in the neshamas of, whether it was the other two sons that Yonah had with Tamar, or whether it was the grandchildren, but we learn that their neshamas went down as well. It lists all of them, and it lists, if you turn to 261, towards the bottom of the page, it says on the left-hand side, in the note, the grand total of 70 descendants.
Not that finally included the girls.
The girls are included where they needed, so to speak. No, let me say it differently, sorry. People are included in the Torah by name where they have a need to be included. The girls are always included, but the Torah might not necessarily need to include them by name. They're still there. If you went through and counted all of them, if you look at the bottom in that table, it says that Jacob, and then it says Leah in brackets 33, Zilpah 16, Bilhah 7, Rachel 14. 40, 56.
62.
Huh?
No.
No.
I'm adding in my own here.
The question is, if you added it all up, if you look at the note there, it only comes to 69. Doesn't come to 70. There's a little tiny note in the bottom left there, if you can see it with the asterisk. The Torah lists only 69 persons. Okay, this adds up to 70 because they include here Yocheved, who is listed as the 70th person. She's not specifically listed in the Torah. That comes to your mention, Denise. Following Midrash and Rashi, who's Yocheved? Yocheved was Moshe Rabbeinu's mother. So now she's coming down to Egypt. She's going to be in Egypt essentially if she lives throughout the whole process, 210 years. She was born, it says, in the walls of Egypt as they came into Egypt. That's why she's not counted there. Now, she had 3 children, Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe. Miriam was 5 years older than Moshe. Moshe was 80 years old when we left Egypt. So we're there for 210 years. Take 80 from 210. She was 130 when she had Moshe. She was 125 when she had Miriam. She never had any children as far as we know before that. So we talk about the miracle of Sarah, and the whole Torah goes to town. Sarah having a baby at 90. Yocheved had a bigger miracle because she had a baby at 125.
Sure. We just had one recently here of 70.
Yeah?
Did you see that picture?
No.
Yes. She looked like a great grandmother, poor thing.
She probably is.
After one after the baby, she felt like.
It was through IVF, or couldn't have been natural, but potentially could have been as a miracle, but
It was not
that's not
miracle.
natural.
It was contrived.
Yes. Okay. So others include Yaakov himself in the count of 70, and others include Hashem, who was down with him, because Hashem will be down with him. The Torah only lists 69, but there were 70. So there's three options of who the 70th is. All three work. Okay. Yosef was in Egypt. He had his two sons. Now remember, Yosef had told Yaakov that they told Yehuda and the brothers he's going to give them Goshen to live in. Yaakov Avinu says, if you look at verse 28, he sent Yehuda ahead of him to Yosef to prepare for him in Goshen when they arrived in land of Goshen. They wanted this place of Goshen. Why did they want this land separate from the rest of Egypt? The first shtetl in history. They wanted to be separate. They wanted the people to be closed in from the Egyptian influence. Egypt was known as the most immoral society of the world. It was a place where you did not want to go. Every negative thing that could happen happened in Egypt. You know, there's that expression, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. That was Egypt. What goes on in Egypt stays in Egypt. And so Yaakov sent Yehuda down to set up the shul, to set up a base medrash, yeshiva. Let's get schools going for the kids. Let's set up Jewish life in our shtetl in Goshen. Unfortunately, over time, the Jews started moving out of Goshen until they had to come all the way back before the Exodus. Now, Yosef harnesses his chariot and he goes out to meet his father. He approached, listen to these words, bottom of 261. He approached before him, fell on his neck, and he wept on his neck excessively. Then Israel said to Yosef, now I can die after having seen your face because you're still alive. Yosef wept on his father Yaakov, or Israel's neck. It doesn't say anything about Yaakov weeping on Yosef. You would think after all this time, Yaakov would be the one who's going to be more emotional, because Yosef knew that his father was still alive. Yaakov had 22 years of waiting, of mourning, when he could mourn because he hadn't seen a body. Yeah. You would think it would be the exact opposite. So the rabbis bring down that, and I'll just read what it says here. I've just seen note 29, bringing Rashi. Yosef wept greatly and continuously. Yaakov, however, did not fall on Yosef's neck, nor did he kiss him. But as the sages say, Yaakov was reciting the Shema at that moment. Gur Aryeh explains why Yaakov chose just this moment to recite the Shema. Supreme righteous people utilize every opportunity and resource to serve Hashem, so that when Yaakov felt a surge of joy and love at the sight of his beloved son after long and painful separation, he submerged his personal feelings and offered all of his love to Hashem. He was so thankful to Hashem. The recitation of the Shema represents acceptance of God's sovereignty, and that is what Yaakov did at this moment of supreme emotion. Ramban maintains that in the literal sense, the subject of the verb wept is not Yosef but Yaakov. So Ramban has a slightly different spin on it. But most of the rabbis explain it. We say Shema, so there's a time limit. You hear, if you in shul early enough in the morning at the moment, they'll announce most weeks. The time to say the Shema is 9:31, I think it is last week. Make sure you say it now, because when we get to it in the tefillah, it's too late. There's a time-bound positive mitzvah, which are mitzvahs incumbent on men. It's more likely than not, Yaakov was not saying the Shema as in the time to say Shema is now. He was saying a declaration. He was saying, Shema Yisrael. He's saying to himself, listen Israel, listen myself, me, his name is Israel. He's talking to himself. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God is in all of my children and all 70 of us. Hashem Echad, but Hashem is the one and only. There's only one Hashem. And so he is basically showing Hashem his absolute love, because the next part of Shema in the Torah, we say Baruch Shem in there, and I'll come back to that at the end, please God. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God with all your heart, with all your money, with all your soul, with everything. He is expressing that absolute love for Hashem, as Rashi and Gur Aryeh explained, at that moment. He is so thankful to Hashem for allowing him to reunite with Yosef. That's what he's doing. He's saying Shema at that time. If it was saying the Shema at the time, or the right time to say the Shema, why didn't Yosef say the Shema then as well? Because Yosef should have said the Shema before that. But Yosef has said the Shema already in the morning, because he knows he's going out to meet his father. He's finished davening. So to understand it, that Yaakov is saying the Shema out of love of Hashem, it's a verse to say, it's a meditation. It's a connection. It's connecting his neshama directly to Hashem's throne of glory, to Hashem himself. And so that's what he does. Yosef says, okay, you're all here. Let's figure out how we're going to handle the whole situation. What are we going to do now that we are down in Egypt? So, brothers, I want you to go and tell Paro that you're shepherds. Because you are shepherds, you're not going to lie. But we need to make sure that Paro understands what we do. It was so important for Yosef to explain this, because the Egyptians venerated the sheep, the lamb. That was their god. They saw the sheep as a god. The Jewish people are shepherds. What do shepherds do with their sheep? Well, they shear them. We don't shear our gods, It's like you can't desecrate a god from the Egyptian perspective. And they eat them. So these people are at a much lower level than us, because they eat our gods. So keep separate from them. Just make sure you tell Paro that that's what you do. That's our line of work. If you think about a shepherd, I heard this in some shiurim yesterday. We've had several shepherds. Who was the first shepherd in the history of the world? Long before David. Many, many thousands of years before David. Keep going. Well, the brothers were shepherds, so it's before them.
Adam.
Not quite. Well, close, very close. Cain killed his brother Hevel. Cain and Abel. Hevel was a shepherd. The very first shepherd in history was the second generation of people. A shepherd is a person who can escape from the physical life. If you think about it, a shepherd's out in the fields with his sheep. He's not subject to all of the pressures of life, of the innuendo and the lashon hora and all the things that go on in the world. A shepherd is not subject to that. A shepherd is separated himself from that. Yosef's telling the brothers, well, we need to be shepherds here. The message that Yaakov's given, that Yosef's giving, is we need to be separate. We need to keep the Jewish people in a cocoon. We need to make sure that we don't get the entire Egyptian influence into our kids. We've seen, if we bring it down to reality, unfortunately, of what's happening amongst those people, those Arab people that live in Israel. Their schools, United Nations has a special schooling system just for them, UNRWA, whatever they call it. It's only for them. The only people in the world who are still refugees 75 years later. Jewish people were refugees in 1948. More Jewish people came into Israel as refugees, coming out of 6 years of horror in the camps, coming to Israel. You don't hear of a single Jewish refugee in Israel anymore as people came. The Russians came as refugees. The Yemenites came as refugees. You don't hear of Jewish refugees anymore. They have refugees and they have schools for refugees, and they are trained from the cradle to hate. And if you educate children in a specific way, that's the way they will go. And that's our biggest problem, because we educate as Westerners, and that's why we don't think like Jewish people should think. We think like Westerners, because that's even if we went to Jewish schools, we are taught in a Western way of thinking. And so the importance of education, the Jewish people invented education. The school systems that we have was invented in the times of the temple, where parents could no longer teach their kids properly. It was put in place that we should have a school system. The school system today, it's changed, but it's pretty much based on that system, where you have a teacher teaching children. What you teach young minds is
Brainwashing.
brainwashing. Yeah. Now there's good brainwashing and bad brain. They say there's criticism of programs, certain programs that go to Israel, that they're brainwashing the kids. Whichever program it might be, they're making them to this or to that, whatever way it might be. Those programs that are good programs actually do brainwash the kids. They take their brains and they wash out all the stuff they've learned in the last 18 years in school and they put good stuff into it. That's brainwashing. That's good brainwashing. And so they set up this system. And Yosef tells Paro that his father's here, and he takes his father to meet Paro. And Paro looks at him. If you look at these words, it's just right at the bottom of 263, the last verse 7. Joseph brought Jacob, his father, and presented him to Paro, and Yaakov blessed Paro, over the page. Yaakov blessed him, interestingly enough, that the waters of the Nile should rise up to Paro. Over time, this made Paro feel that he himself was like a god. Every time he went to the river rose up to him. He was able to then, over the next 210 years, whether it was the same Paro or different Paro, it's an interesting discussion in itself, because it says a new Paro came in beginning of Shmos, but the waters rose up to Paro as a result of this bracha from Yaakov. Paro, when it came to the exile and what Yosef put in place at the end of the Parshah, which we'll discuss next, Paro was able to convince the Egyptians that he was a god. The waters rose up to him. In fact, there's a phenomenal story that we tell, Midrash, that we tell our kids Seder night. Paro used to go down to the river, and the river would rise up to him, and he'd go and bathe in the river. The reason why he would do that was because a god doesn't need to go to the bathroom. So therefore, he didn't go to the palace bathrooms because he couldn't be seen to need the bathroom. So he'd go to the river to bathe, and he'd do his ablutions in the river. The day that Moshe Rabbeinu came to confront Paro and tell him, "Let my people go," not the real words he said, but Paro was going down to the river to bathe, to use the ablutions. And Moshe stops him and stands in front of him and says, "Where do you think you're going?" And now Paro, to use the colloquialism, is busting. And he needs to go now. And Moshe is holding him back. This is how we act out in our Seder nights with little kids, to explain how things happen in the world. But that's as a result of this bracha that Yaakov gave him. So Paro says to Yaakov, "How many days are the days of the years of your life? You are such an old man." I mean, he realizes who Yaakov is. Yaakov is the equivalent of a king. He can feel the royalty. This is Joseph, who's come to him 8-9 years ago as what appears to be comes out of a dungeon and rises to a level of royalty. His father must be greater than him. And he sees this old, disheveled man walking in. So, how old are you, man? It's like he's incredulous. So Yaakov says, the days of my years, my sojourns have been 130 years. There's been few good days, few and bad have been the days of my life. They've not reached the lifespan of my forefathers. Yaakov blessed Paro and he left him. Yaakov says to him, I'm 130 and I've lived a great life. And Yaakov, to some degree, the Rabbonim say his life was shortened because of all of these words that he said to Paro. All these extra words he used. Yosef settled his father and his brothers. He gave them possession of the land, the best of the land, the region of Ramses, as Paro commanded. They were in Goshen. Yosef sustained his father and his brothers and all his father's household with food according to number of children. They all lived very nicely in the land. They were able to educate their kids as Yidden, and they lived a really good life through this period. The Torah then goes back and discusses the 2 years of famine. According to most authorities, it's going back discussing the first 2 years of the famine, because once Yaakov blessed Paro, the famine ended after 2 years. There's a number of rabbis ask questions as to, well, what about the dream? The dream was 7 years. How do we? And there's various different answers to that. Some rabbis learn out that the famine actually did last for 7 years, but Yosef put in place a system, which is what the Torah discusses here, to sustain the Egyptians and keep their economy going by doing what he did. So either way, we can learn both ways, and they both fit in perfectly. They say there's 70 facets of Torah. There's 70 ways of understanding every single word in Torah. And there's just 2 of the ways we can understand this section. Did it last 7 years? Did it, the famine, or did it only last 2 years? I can live with both. It doesn't matter which one actually happened, because I don't need to know that. I need to know what Joseph did. And what did he do? The famine was severe in the land of Egypt. People were weary. He gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt, and basically anybody who needed food came to Joseph. They bought the food off him in the first year. The second year comes along in the famine, and they say, well, we've got no more money. So Joseph buys their land off them for food. And so Joseph is now basically bringing the Egyptian economy into a central economy, a bit of a socialist type economy, where Paro owns everything. The state owns all the land, all the fields, and the people now work for their keep. Whatever they're working on, they're farming, they earn money, and they can live, but they don't own any land anymore. He redistributes the people, he moves them around all over Egypt. He's putting in place a process that when the Jewish people do go into slavery, it will not be so difficult for them. Everybody's misplaced, everybody's not in their own land. Unfortunately, Paro took things a step too far, or beyond what he should have, and he is punished for that. And the Egyptian people, for what they're doing, are punished for that. But at this point, Joseph's putting in place a methodology that the Jewish people can live as Jewish people and not be subject to extreme cruelty. They knew there was going to be difficulty because of the prophecy that Abraham, their great-grandfather, had with Hashem. They knew they were going to go down. Interesting enough, what I said last week about, taxing clergy, minister of religion, that's where it's brought in this week's Parshah. So if you look in the middle of page 267, verse 22, only the land of the priest he did not buy, since the priest had a stipend from Paro, they lived off their stipend that Paro had given them, therefore they did not sell their land. So that's where we've got in history that Joseph didn't take the land of the priests. We don't take tax from clergy. Minister of religion, acting as a minister of religion in Australia today, does not get taxed in terms of fringe benefits tax.
Is it a worldwide thing?
In many countries, in many countries.
Now that you're a rabbi, you don't have to pay tax.
No, it doesn't work like that. No, it's a minister of religion working as a minister of religion. No. Employed. I don't get paid. I'm just a regular balabas.
I'll give you $1.
A regular balabas who is teaching a little bit of Torah that I've learned, hopefully a little bit in the right way. So what most religious organizations do, I know from shuls, I assume churches and mosques and Buddhist temples and whatever else, structure a salary. Rabbis do pay tax. If they earn a cash salary, they pay tax. But what they do is they structure it because there's no fringe benefits tax. So we would structure a salary for a rabbi completely within the realm of the law. It's not tax evasion at all, but that they would get fringe benefits. So their package includes fringe benefits so that we can kind of, in some ways, pay them less, but they can earn more. Their take-home pay is more because they're getting a company car or children's schooling paid for, whatever the thing might be, however it works. I'm not involved in that at all. And how this shul works out, I have no idea. But there are many shuls that do things like that. And I assume all other religions do it as well, because it is encapsulated in the tax law based on what Joseph did. Yeah, that's where it comes from. And other countries certainly have that to some degree. How many still have it, how many don't, I've got no idea. But as long as Australia is a, what do they call it, a Judeo-Christian country, whatever they call it, don't know what that means. Yeah, as long, whatever that means, I don't know. They still identify.
Culture has blocked the whole of South Melbourne today. That it's an absolute nightmare.
For what?
For the protest to free from the sea to the.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen a few.
For the next 3 weeks, every day.
I've seen a few videos questioning some of these students, particularly at Harvard, because Harvard's been this terrible place. And they asked them, what river? What sea?
Got the tape.
I saw a video of some lady with a flag from the river to, she couldn't get it right, from the sea to the mountain to this. It was a
What's
comedy.
the name of the river? I don't know.
She was won over pretty quickly. And unfortunately, these students have no idea either. They've jumped on a bandwagon. No, not most of them, probably all of them almost. Almost all of them. In fact,
Particularly the American students.
yeah, American
Really
college system. It's
It's
just...
shocking.
Not too bad here either.
No, we're doing well. We're catching up.
Yeah. So,
Don't sneeze, we catch the cold.
I've seen, unfortunately, that's the way the world is pushing things, and we need to understand behind this all, Hashem is directing things.
Nobody likes us.
And nobody has liked us
Unfortunately,
since
so
day
we're
one,
friends.
and we need to understand that. We
Some
need
of
to
us
know
don't
that.
love ourselves, and this is part of our
Of course it is.
That's why we've got to love ourselves and get connected, stronger.
And stand up
with
for
ourselves.
We need
Stand up for
to,
our
we need to behave like Jews. That's the bottom line. Where we behave like Jews, we need to. And if you look back at what happened in Israel, and I've spoken about this many, many times, what was going on in Israel from the time this government was elected until October 7th, complete sinas chinam, baseless hatred. They used the judicial reform as a sounding board, as a platform it had nothing to do with judicial reform. Judicial reform, what they were trying to do was actually the most incredible thing, and it should happen. But the left wing used that because they lost power, so that's their way of rounding up the masses. Unfortunately, the same thing happened, well, similar things happened in other parts of Israel. It wasn't only the left wing that would demonstrate. There were some terrible demonstrations from ultra-Orthodox. There were terrible demonstrations from right-wing secularists. It was hatred across the board. Came October 7, and we went from sinas chinam, baseless hatred, to avas chinam, baseless love, just love for another Jew. And unfortunately, as this war's gone on, bits of that are splintering away. The biggest question is going to be what's going to be with Israel and the Jewish people, essentially, on war over day one. What happens the day after this war's finished? No, it can't just be over. We need to make sure that this October 7 can never happen again. That's a given. That is
15 years in the making. I read an article this morning on 24 News.
2006.
15 years they've been banned.
More than that, 2006 they got into power there.
Everybody's blaming the
Don't blame anybody. Don't. That was no. That was my point at the beginning of this year. Hashem was in control. The fact that Israel has the greatest intelligence service in the world by none, and they missed it, was for a reason that Hashem and Hashem only knows. What man will do about it and the recriminations from that scares me. But we need to know that it's not Bibi's head, and it's not the head of Mossad, and it's not this or that one. It's Hashem that's in control. Now, let's end Parshas Vayigash. The last Parsha I'm not going to speak for 1 minute on this. Unfortunately, we don't have time, and we were not going to have a shift next week or the next few weeks. But Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. So in other words, he died at age 147. He gets to the end of his life. He goes through the process of, he blesses Ephraim and Menashe, which is the blessing that we still give our children today on a Friday night. He gets very old. He brings Yosef in, and he blesses them. And then he starts blessing his children. He blesses Reuven. So Reuven was my firstborn, my strength, my vigor, the foremost in rank. But you acted impetuously. You moved my bed from where I wanted it to be. You are not going to be my leader. Shimon and Levi, you're brothers. You wiped up Shechem. Your weaponry is a stolen craft. You did something wrong. You're in conspiracy. Yehuda, you're going to be the king. You're going to be the one who will be the king. He says, Gur Arya Yehuda. Many people who are called Yehuda are known as Yehuda Arya. Yehuda Arya Leib in the Yiddish for lion, because Yehuda is the lion. That's the symbol of the tribe of Yehuda. And then he says that he basically brings that Yehuda is going to be Mashiach. There's a glimpse, it says here, a tiny glimpse of Messianic era, comes in. Then he blesses Zvulun. He's going to be a sailor. And Yisachar is a strong-boned donkey. And there's a relationship between the two of them. Dan's going to avenge his people. Gad, Asher. Naphtali is a hind, as I said at the beginning. He says beautiful blessings. Yosef is a charming son. Binyamin is a predatory wolf. We have people called Binyamin Zev. Very often people are given that name. Zev is a wolf in Hebrew. And these are the tribes of Israel. They're 12. He spoke to them and he blessed them. He blessed each according to its appropriate blessing. When we educate children today, the school system, the fault of the school system is a teacher comes in and educates a classroom. And they have to aim it at some level, at the middle level generally. So the lower level kids suffer and the top level kids suffer because it's got to be aimed somewhere. A good teacher is obviously able to aim it at all. Shlomo Melech, King Solomon said, "Chanoich lenar al pidako," educate every child according to his way. Each child needs to be recorded his or her way. Every child's got their own derech, their own way of living, and that's how we should educate. That's a parent's the most difficult job. Every child needs to be educated the way that child should be. He's about to bless his children, Yaakov. And just before all of the blessings, and he suddenly starts shuddering because he's about to reveal to them the end of time. This is what's going to happen in the Messianic era. I'm going to reveal when Mashiach's going to come. So you're going to know there's a date, there's a time. Now the problem with that is, if we know exactly when Mashiach's going to come, most people will just go about their lives willy-nilly doing what they like. We don't need to bother. And on the day before Mashiach comes, we'll do tshuva and all be happy. It's not going to work. So Hashem takes away his prophecy. And he sees what's called the kates, the end of time. And Hashem takes away his prophecy. And he starts shuddering. And his sons stand around to him. And they say to him, Shema Yisrael. Listen, Israel. Tati, Daddy, listen. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem's our God. Hashem is one. We're one. We are 12. And then he realizes, I can't tell them the end of time. So he says, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Va'ed. Blessed is Hashem's name, his glorious kingdom be forever and ever. And then he goes on to bless his children with 12. And he goes through all of those blessings and he gets to the end and he says, the tribes of Israel are 12. Second time he said that there are 12 tribes, you're all one. This is what he spoke to him. He blessed them all according to appropriate blessing. And he leaves this world. He asked to be buried in Israel, as spoken at the beginning, and he gets taken back to Maras Machpelah. And the Parshah, the Sefer ends with Yosef reassuring his brothers that he's not going to take vengeance on what they did to him. It's their secret. They never told their father, and Yosef never told his father that he was sold to Egypt. Yaakov went to his grave not knowing how Yosef got down to Egypt, because it wasn't the thing we needed to do. We don't need to tell everybody everything. We can keep things private, because there was a hidden subtle message in that, I think. I don't know.
It won't work.
It does work because it gets through slowly.
You just
We had a...
It does for you. The men are equally.
Dennis and I had a private conversation on the way in here. We'll keep it private.
Just belong to a bowls club.
No, I'm not interested in Lashon Hara. We don't talk. You know what?
Equally enthusiastic.
What did the Chofetz Chaim say? The Chofetz Chaim said, I'll use it in my words, but he said something to the effect of, low people speak about people. People are lowly people. What have got nothing to say? Did you hear about Yena? Did you? There's nothing else to say. Low people who are badly educated, like low people. We'll use that word. Average people just talk about things. They talk about things that are going on, and great people talk about ideas. And
I thought we spoke about both.
no, everybody. No. So the point is, everybody speaks about all three.
Yeah, of course.
It depends where our focus is. Okay, are we speaking about people, not mentioning names of people, but can we help somebody by speaking a little bit about what they're doing, maybe to help them? Then we're not speaking about people, we're speaking about ideas to help somebody, but we are speaking about kind of all three. So what is our focus? Do we have to forward every single WhatsApp message we got. Did you hear about this one? You know what that one said? Or do we just stop for a moment and just say, I don't need to do that? I mean, in the old days, did I pick up the phone and dial?
And that you
Did you hear the news?
Yeah.
That's right. And so,
She was really
yeah,
The story
the story
got
changes
there.
completely. We all play that game. That what they call broken wire, broken telephone wire. We all played that game, and there's a reason why we played it. It's to teach us that be careful what you say, because by the time it gets round to everybody or to three people, it's changed.
Well, that's it. Every story worth telling is worth exaggerating.
That's right. And not only that, it becomes changed, and the facts change, and the people change, and suddenly somebody who innocently did something is now a rapist and a murderer, because that's what happens over time. And so we need to be very careful. So Joseph didn't reveal to his father what his brothers did. The brothers certainly didn't tell their father, because they needed to protect their father, that he should bless them with the right things. We need to know that everything we do and everything we say has repercussions. And that's why Joseph wanted to put us in Goshen, wanted to lock us away, keep us enclosed, so we don't have the stories of the outside world, you know, the TV and the internet and everything else we get coming unfiltered into us affects us. Everything we hear affects us. And so we need to put a filtering system in place so that we cannot be affected, so that we can just focus on what we need to focus. Focus on the good news and the good things that happen. We should only hear good news. Everybody should have a wonderful summer. And we should all be healthy. And we should all travel to Eretz Israel in health and in wellness. And we should wait for the coming Mashiach. He should come speedily in our time.